Hello. Good morning. I hope you all enjoyed the previous session. I welcome you all to this session on Love-Asana, Twists and Turns of the Heart. We have Vijay Nagaswamy, Preeti Shenoy, and Milan Vohra as panelists. Nandita Bose will be moderating this session. A psychiatrist, couple therapist, and writer, Dr. Vijay Nagaswamy writes books on the theme of relationships. He has written Courtship and Marriage, The 24/7 Marriages, The 50-50 Marriage, Three is a Crowd. His sixth book, To D or Not to D, Working Towards an Amicable Divorce, is due to be launched this year. Preeti Shenoy is among the highest selling authors in India. Her books include Life is What You Make It, Tea for Two, and A Piece of Cake, The Secret Bush List, and The One You Cannot Have. Milan Vohra is the first Indian author for Mills and Boon with her book, The Love-Asana. She has written young adult stories in Love Like That and Other Stories, in Vanilla Desires, a musical comedy called Made in India, and scripts for Sesame Street for Indian television. Her latest book is TikTok, We're 30. Nandita Bose has written Tread Softly, The Perfume of Promise, and If Walls Could Weep. We will now begin the session. Over to the speakers.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm kind of indebted to all of you for having taken, a break from your Sunday brunches and snoozes and having made it here. I hope the session really caters to what you've been looking for today. And I have some really impressive guests, and I hope we do justice. So Preeti and Milan and I are all local writers, and we do meet each other quite often. And this is the first time I'm actually in a session with them, and I'm pretty happy, and I'm raring to go. The gentleman on my right is Dr. Vijay Nagaswamy, and he's written, the book that I've read the most is the book called Three's a Crowd. And it's on, on extramarital relationships. And I consider him a big friend because I've gone over and over that book, not really how he intended it to be, because I was trying to see whether there was some way, some sneaky way by which one could have an extramarital relationship without too much collateral damage. Unfortunately, his book did not give me that. So if any of you find it in his book, please write in to me and tell me that, ma'am, there is a way. Literary Fest, Bangalore Literature Festival 2014. It's an impressive place to be in. We are in a wonderful place. It's a wonderful location. Lots of people have worked tirelessly to make this happen. You know the kind of things that are happening in the world outside. Atrocities, marginalization, violence, killing. And here there are 4 deviants on stage who just talk about love. And I wanted to take time out in this session to decide whether we are deviants. And you would be the judge. But before I begin, I just wanted a little show of hands. How many of you have read one of us? Any one of us? Oh, fantastic. Great. So my first question, and this I address to Preeti, is why did you actually take up romance writing?
So I've written ever since I can remember. So ever since I was a child, I have written. And the thing about my books is, I never classified them as romance. So I think it's with what has happened is publishers need to put your book in a slot. So they'll either call it chick lit, or they'll call it, mystery, or they'll call it non-fiction. Because it's, so according to me, this, this classification happens from the publisher's side and to make it easier in the market. So if it's like, if anyone writes about a love story, see, in all my books, love is not the core theme. It's not like boy meets girl and, they run off into the sunset happily together. They're all very real. They face, a lot of real problems. For example, one of my most successful books, Life is What You Make It, is actually about bipolar disorder, but it's also a love story. So therefore, I have a lot of these things woven into my book. So I never set out to be a romance writer as such, but that's what I got classified into, and here I am. So.
My next question will be to you, Milan. What is the most common reaction you get when you tell people that, I spend my time just dealing with romance and relationships?
Okay, so I think what it's done is that it's intensified what used to happen to me all my life, which was for some reason I was, at the receiving end of people's detailed love and sex stories and things like that. I used to wonder, and it was just something I accepted. Whether I was at a committee meeting, I would come out of it in a building or something, and I would find people telling me their stories. So now it's kind of gotten, more intense, because the moment somebody knows that, and especially this tag of being the first Indian Mills and Boon author, and everybody's eyes light up. And the only thing is that, so now there's no escaping it. It's coming in all my inbox messages, and people are sharing their stories at airports and so on. I enjoy it.
So now I turn to the gentleman on the panel, and I want to ask you a question, Doctor, that I've always wanted to ask, a psychiatrist. Tell us of your deepest childhood trauma. No, I'm joking, I'm joking. What really did happen when you took, time out from your practice to write a book? Did you get this kind of a reaction to that relationships? And did people tell you, are you crazy? You're giving away your, your secrets, that's your bread and butter, and you could charge by the hour for it, and you're just giving it off to public?
Well, if you had a couch, I would have spoken about my trauma. But since we don't have one here, I'll just speak about how I wandered into this. Yeah, I was working with a lot of couples, and I found that one of the biggest issues most people were approaching me for were issues which pertain to their lack of understanding of what actually happens in a relationship. And so I thought I'd actually write about it, and I was extremely surprised with the wonderful response I got. I mean, the 24/7 marriage apparently became popular as a wedding gift. And my next book, which is 50-50 Marriage, which is for older couples, became popular as a wedding anniversary gift, I understand. My third book, Three is a Crowd, which is on infidelity, I'm sure is not popular as a gift at all, but most people probably read what Nandita wanted to read into it. And unfortunately, many of them have written in saying, is there any way I can have an affair and get away with it? So this is a question I've been exposed to. But the fourth book, the one which is forthcoming, is what many people are disappointed with, because it's on divorce. So they think that I'm sleeping with the enemy, that I've kind of gone to the other side, and I'm not writing marriage anymore, I'm writing divorce. So I'd be curious to see how many people actually buy it, because more and more people are getting divorced nowadays.
So my next question would be to all three of you. And the question is this: is there a philosophy that underpins your work? And I've actually written it out, and I've written coherent or incoherent. I don't mean incoherent, in that kind of a sense. I just mean, is there something evolving, something that's still nebulous that you would like to talk about? Milan, would you like to go?
Well, I think that, I agree with what Dr. Vijay said just now, which is that, we're seeing relationships dissolving faster than, we can imagine. And around me, I keep looking for successful, marriages or even successful long relationships. And it's harder and harder to find. But I think for me, the underlying thing is that I am an optimist. And despite all that I see around me, I think that, the fact that you can hope to be able to find somebody to share your life with, even if that somebody is a dog, it doesn't have to be a person of the same sex or whatever. But I think that business of hoping to be able to share your dreams and your life with somebody exists in me, and therefore I like to be able to write about that. And if I may, I could read, actually, I think it kind of, the blurb on the back of my latest book kind of summed it up well, if I may just read from that, a para. So this is a scene where Nishad and Lara, who are the main protagonists in the book, they're standing on the balcony and they're watching, it's early in the book when all the friends have come together for a reunion, and they're watching a romance unfold between a driver and the ayah of one of their friends' babies. And they're seeing that whole, the coy, coquettish game that's happening. From there, Nishad says, interesting, isn't it, how someone is always utterly attractive to someone else. For every male tree frog, there is a female tree frog whose dry skin and warts and bulging eyes are the most divine. And to you, Lara Bagai, a Karela is a thing of beauty, Nishad comments. So he remembers I love Karela, so what? I take it your interest in frogs is purely academic, I snigger. I promise you I'm not in danger of being madly besotted by one anytime soon, he half smiles. So I think this thing of, the fact that it really doesn't matter, where we imagine this perfect kind of guy or the perfect kind of woman, it's not that. It's about, something there working for you, and I like to live in that hope.
And just taking from what Milan was saying, about this whole thing of being an optimist, and I think that's really wonderful because, see, we're a nation obsessed with marriage, okay? We've been obsessing about marriage, we'll continue to obsess about marriage, and even if we are getting divorced, we become innocent divorcees, and we are on secondmarriage.com and so on and so forth. So I think love will always be there, whether we like it or not. And for some of us it works well, some of us it doesn't, but I still think we need to keep at it to get it going right.
No, I think love is a very powerful driving force because everyone wants to be loved. They want to be accepted for who they are. And if you were to ask me what one underlying philosophy of all my work is it is that live life to the fullest because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So one of my books, in fact, what happened is a cousin of mine, he lost his wife all of a sudden. That morning she was hale and hearty and she's taken her scooter and she's gone and bought vegetables and all of that. They had 2 young children. By evening, she was choking and she was gone. That hit me quite badly. In fact, that features in the book, The Secret Wish List. So I really feel, value each day. I feel these fights and everything which every couple goes through. I mean, at the end of the day, if you love each other, it's so petty. It's so petty because you don't know what is going to happen next. And the person whom you're talking to today may not even be there tomorrow. So that is one theme which I have dealt with consistently in my book is live life to the fullest, do what your heart tells you to do. And I feel that's like really important when it comes to love, when it comes to relationship, when it comes to, your philosophy, personal philosophy, like, don't hold on to these petty grudges and life is so short. So I do believe very strongly in that. That comes across in all my work.
Thank you, Preeti. This is one question that I will also try to attempt because, I am a gas bag and it's very difficult to shut me up. So unfortunately, there are no tree frogs in my philosophy. This brilliant idea came to me last night when I was watching, I was listening to Madam Shubha Mudgal sing. And so I know basic Hindustani classical, but I'll show off about it anyway since I have the mic. Basically, time is linear. But in Hindustani classical music, as maybe in many other forms as well, but I'm talking about what I know, we try to make it cyclical. So we take a tal and we keep repeating it. And how does the singer or the instrumentalist deal with it, So they sing the basic, the basic roop of the bandish for one cycle. For the next cycle, there's a very small deviation and elaboration. And it deviates a little more. It deviates a little more. And therefore, you have, sort of widening circles of that one essential bhav. And that, I think, is what we are trying to do, whether there are wars, whether there are, atrocities, whether there are things that really disturb us all over the world. We can only do things with ourselves, our lives, and this is how I think we do it. With smaller circles, we practice in the smaller circle, then we move to a slightly larger circle, and hopefully this radiation of love will make a difference to our society. I'm extremely intelligent. I can't tell you how intelligent I am. We were discussing the questions that we were going to ask, and Namita Gokhale, the immense author, was there. And she asked, she just came up with a question, and I said, great, that's exactly the question that I was thinking of too. So, if in case you wondered how intelligent I am, the question is, first to you, doctor, do men and women have differing expectations from relationships? Alternate question, do they love differently?
I know I'm in a minority here. That's a very interesting question, because if you really look at love, and I hate to burst bubbles because, all of them write very lyrically about love. But the way I see it is that there's a science behind love. There is basically a whole bunch of chemicals that are interacting with each other when we fall in love, and the manner in which we engage with each other. Obviously, when it comes to romantic love, men and women do experience it slightly differently, because men are pumping more with chemicals like dopamine, adrenaline, testosterone, and therefore the whole experience of love can be very intense. Now, for women, aside of these chemicals, they have this extraordinary chemical called oxytocin, which we generally refer to as the cuddle chemical, which is why women are more touchy-feely, more into tactile communication. They want to express more. So I don't think the phenomenon of love by itself is too different, but there's a slight chemical variation in the two, and also the way we express love. Men generally express love until the commitment is sealed. Once the commitment is sealed, the need to express seems to vanish. Look, I'm not saying anything bad about the guys, okay? But what happens is that after the initial romantic love experience, romantic love has to die because it's too intense, it's too exhausting, it's going to burn us out. But it's the transfer from romantic love to intimate love that men have a slightly harder time of. But those men who have a greater, shall we say, balance of their feminine side in them are able to get into the intimate love. And there are many women who are as masculine as many men. They find it hard to get into intimate love as well. So I think it's 6 of this, half a dozen of the other. Men and women do love and express love slightly differently, but the underlying phenomenon remains the same.
I knew I would regret getting a psychiatrist on my panel. My husband sitting in the front row, Preeti Shenoy's husband Satish is sitting in the front row, and you've just handed them excuses on a platter. Like, see, the doc said so. Yes, your views, Milan.
No, I was, it's very interesting you say this, because what you've spoken of through your experience as a practitioner. I think in TikTok with 30, for example, where I had 12 people and 6 men and 6 women. So one of the couples whose relationship I explored in the course of the book was very similar to the situation you're talking about. This is a couple who got married, soon after college. And then you see the problems it runs into, because the woman has a very successful career and the man runs into problems a little later. So after the initial fire is kind of dying out, you actually have it dying out completely, and the man's libido suffers a lot. So there is great speculation, the fact that he's actually completely, maybe he has an erectile dysfunction or something. And there is also speculation on that it's probably happened because he is feeling diminished by the woman's success. And, one of the naive solutions suggested is that you actually need to have a woman who's there behaving like an intern and essentially pandering to the male ego, which is going to get the libido up and running again. And I think it's, again, stemming from the way we are seeing love in various forms, from the early stages to what happens a little later. Yeah, so I agree with you on that.
Bill Clinton will never drop out of our consciousness, will he? Yes, Preeti.
No, what Dr. Vijay said reminded me of, stray dogs chasing the car. So, once they've, men, you said that men don't express once they've, got the woman. So it reminds me of the stray dog, once they catch the car, they won't know what to do with it. So it's, to me, it seemed like that. But, jokes apart, one of my books I had to write from a male perspective. The one you cannot have, the protagonist is a guy. So I was thinking so much like a man, so I tend to agree with you about men and women experiencing love differently. And, for my feedback, of course, I asked Satish. I said, do you think this sounds like a guy? Do you think this feels like a guy? And two close male friends, I asked them. I said, does this sound like a guy? And I realized, as a woman, or as women, we tend to look at love very differently from what guys tend to look at. For guys, it's like very, very physical. Like, they see a fantastic looking woman. There's no guy who won't turn around and have a second look. But for a woman, it's a lot more than a guy with, say, great biceps and a great body. Women, you won't find a lot of women going, huh. So I feel it's when coming to the...
Yeah, but, just adding to what you were saying, Preeti, that when a lovely woman passes, men turn around. When a lovely woman passes, women also turn around. They don't look at the guys, they look more at the women.
Again, this is another question that I'm going to hijack very briefly. If you ask me what I really believe, and I think that in all the successful relationships that I've been married 24 years, and that's an endurance feat. I think what happens is when you cycle your gender. So there are times when I'm ill, like I am today, and I expect my husband to be nursemaid and treat me with, kid gloves and even mother me. And there are times when, I'm the man, of the house, and I'm kind of taking these rules. It only should not end up being a clash. We should have that kind of an understanding where, the cycling happens you basically get to learn the rhythm of somebody that you live with. And then that cycling happens. When you know the person is vulnerable, then you don't have this, horrible man, whatever. Then you become a woman. And when you know that the person needs, a firm hand, and then you take a kind of a masculine role. And this cycles in all relationships. I really believe in the ancient principle of the Ardhanarishvara. It is there in all of us. And if we know how to channel this at the right moment in our relationships will work. I think I'm talking too much, so I'll give them all a chance to actually speak. I want you all to tell me about the focus of the kind of relationships that you examine, and you could take examples from your books and just tell us a little more about your books.
For me, the focus will always be on sustaining the relationship and what are the things that one has to do to sustain a relationship and take it forward. Because like Dr. Vijay said, the romantic love is not going to last. It is going to turn into something deeper, something more meaningful. So I've been married 19 years now. So initially when we were seeing each other, it's like 24/7 we were on the phone. It's like, we can't stop talking to each other. To the extent that Satish would call me up, and I was a little embarrassed because, so many calls in the office. So I told them, whatever calls come for me, transfer it to the back office. So I thought that I had solved my problem. And then I had the peon running all across the office. Madam, aapke liye phone, Then I had to run across the office and take his calls. Those were the pre-mobile eras, of course. Of course, that settles down into something more stable. So what are the things that one has to do to take it forward? And I think it's very essential for both the man and the woman to grow together. Because we are no longer the person we were 19 years back. So we both grow in our individual experiences. So so when you're growing, you have to pull your partner along. If your partner is growing, your partner has to pull you along. If you don't pull each other along, there is going to be a gap and that you are going to drift apart. So I think that is what my books focus on.
In my case, the first book that I wrote was Mills and Boon, which was, in typically if anyone's read a Mills and Boon, it is primarily the story of a hero and a heroine, and there is very little scope for secondary characters. So the highs and lows that the characters experience is much greater. So there is a far more emotional intensity and journey that you're going to make with them. And versus say something that I've written in TikTok where you have, which is closer to real life in the sense that there is a lot more happening in everybody's lives. So one of the things that I found very interesting in this process was to examine the way we write our characters. And for instance, if I know that I have got this woman that I'm writing who has a self-destructive, and a lot of us have self-destructive tendencies. So it's very interesting to see where you can stretch the boundary line and how far am I going to make her self-destruct? Because in relationships, very often, especially in early stages, we tend to keep, working towards in some self-destructive way. We're kind of doing something that we know is actually not the best way to be dealing with the relationship, but we're doing it. So how far do I want this woman to go on that journey before she becomes absolutely annoying? If I can, as a writer and as a reader, see this, she's on this path. So it's nice for me to learn that. Or for example, if I'm actually building somebody who has this whole perfectionist sort of goal in her life, and we, again, in real life, we tend to do that. We have ideals that we've set up for ourselves, especially in early years of marriage and early stages of relationship. And again, how far do I want this woman to become a perfectionist to the point that she becomes so boring? I don't want a woman who's, ticking all the things and has become a boring person. So it's good to be able to keep seeing yourself also through the mirror of life and the writing that we're doing.
I really don't know what my focus is. All I can say is that I work on a few fundamentals. The first of these is I don't view marriage as a sacrament. I view it as a relationship. Unfortunately, in our country, we tend to think of it as a sacrament, which is why we feel once we get in, we can't get out. We are stuck with this person for life and hope they become less of a nuisance, in the years to come. But I don't believe it's a sacrament, it's a relationship. Number two, love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship. Love is very necessary. Love, is something that fills us with joy. And love is something that makes us feel good about ourselves, yes. But we also need trust, we also need respect, we also need intimacy. Now, these are what I believe are the 4 pillars of any long-term man-woman relationship, or same-gender relationships for that matter. And the other basic fundamental that I work with is that marriages of convenience really get people into a plateau kind of situation. It comes in the way of their personal growth. Unfortunately, the majority of marriages, in our country, certainly not necessarily in metropolitan India, but in smaller town India, are marriages of convenience. And you just hang in there because divorces are very expensive. So most people can't afford getting divorced, so they stay in the marriage. And the way I see it is that, staying in a marriage of convenience is a conscious choice. You have to be aware of what you're doing. So basically, if we are mindful and aware, that's what I believe will keep the relationship going. And as Nandita was saying, the capacity to switch between states, that's what makes for intimacy. I mean, we need to parent each other, we need to be adults with each other, we need to be children with each other. And it's only when we're able to move each of these states with comfort that we're going to be in a really intimate relationship.
Thank you, Doctor. Time for another quick, short straw poll. How many of you are thinking right now that we need to buy a few more books and read a little more? Oh, fantastic. The numbers are growing. I'm very, very happy. We were just talking, when we meet, we just talk too much, and poor doctor was like, I don't know what to do with these women. But one of the things I just realized, Preeti and I, that both of us have a kid of different genders, of course, around 16. And it's funny that both our kids say that we don't want to get married. So, okay. Milan's 24-year-old also says, I don't want to get married. So are we pro-marriage, anti-marriage? Do you think we are evolving into a society where it doesn't matter? Like, I think somewhere in the US, it is still feasible to not have a marriage at all. Would we move towards a society like that? What's your opinion?
In one of my books, a character says, you can either be married or you can be happy. So I think our children are probably echoing, those sentiments. And I think it's perfectly possible. If you look at the world today, it is no longer the world which we grew up in. It's completely different. The way we socialize is different. The way we form relationships is different. The way people break up is different. In our times, we could never imagine breaking up over SMS. Or worse, discovering it as a status message, You had a fight. Next thing you know, on Facebook, your status is relationship status, I'm single. I mean, it's so different. So in today's time, so what, if someone were to ask me, if I know many 20-year-olds who say that marriage is meaningless. Who wants to take so much time? Because marriage is an effort. There's so much effort from both sides. So why should I make that effort for someone else? And why should I have children and spend all my money on educating that child, sending that child abroad, whereas I might as well go on a holiday and enjoy? So what do you say to that? It's a choice that you make. So, if you ask them, what happens if you are lonely? You can get a dog, you can get a cat, that's enough to alleviate your loneliness. So the world is changing. And I think change is a good thing. If people are happy not getting married, if people are, I wouldn't be so preachy as to say that marriage is the be all end all. At the end of the day, it is what works for you. So I think we are slowly moving towards that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll ask Milan. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by asking Doctor right now, so I'll ask Milan and then I will ask Doctor.
So I personally think that, marriage needs to come with a license which is time bound. And it should, you probably should get into it only if you want to have a child and make sure that, that there is parenting which is kind of equally shared. And one of the things that I kind of started discussing with my daughter, who's now 24 and my son is 17, is, in fact, one of my conditions was, if you guys are planning to get married, I want you guys to live with that person, and can you please at least give me a 5-year period where you've lived with that person, so I know that person for 5 years and I have an opinion. So I'm coming from a very strong, point of view, which is the contrary to marriage. And not that I haven't been married and so on, but I just think that the way it's going, and with apps that are coming up, with Woo and Tinder and so on and so forth, I think you really, really need to think through before you get into something. As you said, it's not that easy to get out. And in India, you're not just marrying the individual, you're marrying the village. And that entire clan that the person comes with.
Yeah, I guess that's why now there's an increasing population of what are called SBCs, people who are single by choice. And also the other interesting phenomenon is that the average age at marriage has gone up. In urban India, it's not less than 30 for men and 26 for women. And this is just the average. But more and more people are choosing to get married after they're done with all the relationships, all their, shall we say, friends with benefits, all their hookups, and then they take a call as to whether they're ready to get into a committed relationship. See, the way I see it, I don't think marriage is such a big deal, It's the commitment that you choose to make, And when we make a commitment, we're not making a commitment to sell our souls, We're really making a commitment to work on the relationship to the extent that we can, always believing that the partner has to make a matching contribution. Today the thing is, most people looking at their parents' marriages, they're looking at the marriage of their peers around them, and they believe that marriage is for the birds. Now this is really true because the avian species are the ones who stay very committed for a very long time. But most human beings today are very uncomfortable making that kind of commitment. Now, in the West, there's a phenomenon called polyamory, where people believe that you can't love just one person in the course of your life, and therefore they all have multiple partners. The expectation is that if my partner finds another partner, I will practice an emotion called compersion, which means that I will be truly happy for that partner. And I will have another partner, and my partner, primary partner, should also practice compersion. Now, and there's almost 500,000 of them, they call polys, 500,000 of them taking part in pride parades and so on and so forth. Now, is that the way it's going to happen? I have no idea. All I know is that men and women are going to constantly seek each other out, The structures may change, they may get married, they may not get married, or they may get married, divorced, and married again. Or, they may just choose to live in. And many people believe that a live-in relationship, people get into that so that they can walk out. And nothing could be further from the truth, I think people who are in live-in relationships are perhaps even more committed, than people who are in a marriage relationship. The basic issue is the feeling of coupledom that two people enjoy. If they enjoy that, whether they're structured in a marriage, in a live-in relationship or whatever, maybe at some point in life, marriage can be replaced by dogs and cats. But I still think that for as long as we have all of these chemicals in us, we're still going to be looking for a partner. And we're still going to look for that ideal partner. And we're not going to find that ideal partner. And we're going to realize that, actually my partner's not so bad after all.
I'm actually thinking of cutting the session a little short and going straight to my last question, because I can see your faces all bright and I know that there are potent questions coming. Am I right? Right. So this is something that's really intrigued me, and since I'm getting free advice from a psychiatrist, how could I let that pass? Do toxic relationships exist? How do we identify somebody who has a chance of getting into toxic relationships? And what do we do if we are in one?
Well, toxic relationships do exist, I mean, there are many couples who can't be with each other, who can't be without each other. And that would be the definition of toxicity, really. Because when a couple decides that they're not able to make it work and they choose to get out of the relationship, that would be, what you'd say would be a healthy choice that they are engaging in. But couples who choose to stay in a marriage, despite making life very difficult for each other as well as for the children, now that's a couple in a classic toxic relationship. You have toxic relationships which abound with violence. It could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be sexual. There are toxic relationships where there's no communication at all, where people live parallel lives, lead relationships of convenience, where each partner has or engages in multiple infidelities. Now, these are toxic relationships because, simply put, infidelity and monogamy are fundamentally incompatible. I make no moral judgment about infidelity. It's just that it doesn't go with monogamy. So either we have to choose to be in a monogamous relationship or choose to be polyamorous. But most of us tend to stay in a marriage believing that if we stay in this marriage, somehow, magically it will work out. And while we're waiting for it to work out, we're all busy looking for our soulmates. Now, what precisely a soulmate is, I'm still not clear about, but it's something that all of us seem to want because all of us are looking for that magical soulmate on the friendly internet. And there seem to be many soulmates around. But the fact is that that does not add to a marriage. I think a relationship is something we need to be mindful about. And if we find that we are toxic, we need to do something about it. It doesn't mean that every time you're in a toxic relationship, you have to get out of it. You can still restructure a relationship. But to restructure it, you need to work at it. And that is something that we don't always consciously make an effort to do. Can we identify somebody who's a potentially toxic partner? Hard to do. The only thing that one can be sure of is if domestic violence exists, toxicity is very likely to follow. But that apart, it's very hard to tell who's going to be a potentially toxic partner.
Milan, any thoughts?
Well, I think that the other thing is, how do you recognize it? I think that you pretty often see a pattern in your own relationships, and you see it in the outside, friends that you have. You see people repeating patterns. If you got into a pattern of suffering, and I think it is also, I think all of us, I don't want to get into this whole responsible thing or whatever, because you want your readers to empathize or relate to experiences of the lows and so on in a relationship also, but we also tend to glorify suffering. We tend, lyrics, so many song lyrics. I remember Madeleine Perrault, for instance, most of her songs are, your lips may be cold, but your heart is as black as night, and then I still love it, and I still cry, and I still keep on pining for the person that I lost. But you're seeing that pattern of being in a bad part of the relationship, and we keep multiplying it. So I think the trick is, I actually learned from my daughter about this, because she keeps saying that, I think the important thing is to be with somebody who treats you well. And, too much importance is also given to this business of chemistry that we all write about.
So I would like to answer this question against the background of one of my books, which is The Secret Wish List. So, and this I think happens mostly in, I wouldn't say in urban India, but in most places, what happens is the woman gives up her career, she loses her financial independence. So she's kind of, forced to stay in the marriage. So in this book, the guy never hits her, the guy never abuses her, the guy earns well, he looks after her But then he's never there for her, and she kind of feels compelled to keep doing stuff for the guy. She stays in the marriage for 15 years and without realizing that she's in a toxic relationship. I'll have a small spoiler here. End of the thing, she walks out of the marriage. But it takes her that much guts. So where does one get the guts to walk out of a toxic relationship? A. B. Even recognize that you are in one. You may not even recognize that you are the victim because on the surface of it, everything is fine. So I think these two important things, and this is where I think it's very important for women to have their own financial independence. According to me, it is really important. Because I think in our country, especially women take the hard part of it. And suffering is glorified, like you said, suffering is glorified. Oh, I'm the mother, so I have to sacrifice the best, the best parts of the dishes are, saved for the thing. I'll eat the burnt parts. That kind of a thing has to end, is what I feel.
I would also like to answer, and in just a brief, do you have mics ready for the audience? Yeah. This is from experience, gray hair and all that. If by the age of 21, you've not been able to identify things that are going to harm you, you're dead. So it's the most essential life skill you can teach your kids. Walk away from crap. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter who you are, but you must teach your children never to torture themselves in the sense of for the sake of an ideal. And all successful people, I feel people who've come out in life through very, very difficult circumstances, have at some point or the other learned, to even walk out of a relationship that's on the brink of an engagement or a brink of a marriage because they know. And that, I think, is an essential tool. Quick show of hands. How many of you all are planning to go and buy books, our books? I need to see more hands, please. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Get them signed. I think we'll be going to a signing session somewhere. And yes, questions, please. I would like it to follow a format. Please tell us your name. Please tell us who you're addressing the question to. Thank you.
To Dr. Nagaswamy. You don't want to make a judgment on relationships, marriage, etc. So when you counsel your couples, what exactly do you tell them in case of problems? I mean, you'll have to have some kind of judging there, isn't it?
See, there's a difference between a professional judgment, where you make a judgment on the state of the relationship, and an emotive judgment, which is basically a value judgment on what you think they should be doing. Now, the object of couple therapy or counseling is not to advise, because by the time a couple has come to see me, they've been advised by just about everybody they know. The object is to help them understand what is happening in their marriage which they're not conscious of, and for them to then make considered choices. Now, that choice could well be to move away, but that choice could well be to understand what strategies they need to evolve to get onto a plane of higher intimacy or greater closeness. So the objective of couple therapy is not to tell them what to do, but to help them understand that this is what is going on in the marriage. This is why we are making a mess of it. And do we have it in us to fight for the marriage rather than fight each other? So that really is the goal of therapy. So it's not that I don't make professional judgments. Of course I do. Otherwise I won't be able to make an assessment at all. But I don't pass judgment. I don't say that you have to stay married or you have to get divorced or infidelity is morally wrong. It goes against scriptures and so on and so forth. I don't pass those kind of value judgments, no.
Hi, my name is Neeti, and it's the question's not pertaining to any one particular. I'm sorry about that, but I'd like to comment and compliment as well at the same time that unabashedly, the way you guys write around various facets of a relationship. I'd like to know that if you read such novels, what would you, or how would you throw light on, let's say, extramarital, which is also considered a toxic relationship? Everybody would want, it's a dopamine that everybody would want to thrive on, but it's sinful enough in our kind of setup, even now, to talk openly about. And this is I'm coming from an age group, even if I were to talk about myself, early 30s or 40s, where most of us have been in a marriage for 8 to 10 years.
Yes, see, the fact is the fact is extramarital affairs do exist. You know, the fact that he's written a book, Three is a Crowd. So anyone who's in an extramarital relationship, I would say, please go read that book. You know, that book will give you a lot of answers. That book sheds. And, you know, when I was reading the book, it had me nodding at several places. I write a column, my column is called Sex and the City. I write in the Financial Chronicle every Saturday. And I have dealt with extramarital relationships. There is no doubt that it is going to kill your marriage. I mean, there's no way that you can have an extramarital relationship and then expect to, you know, not be discovered or not be caught. Or forget that, the guilt is going to kill you at some point of the time. So ultimately, it's a choice you make, you know. The fact that you chose your partner in the first place is because you saw something in your partner, there was love there. And like I said earlier, if you have drifted apart, it's because you've not grown together, you have not communicated. So while it does happen, yes, I think it is a choice that one makes to kind of, you know, so I wouldn't say that it is great or it is wrong or it is right, because that's up to each individual to decide. And that's what the characters in my book do.
Yeah, hello. Actually, I'm a geologist. Later, I came to read all this mysticism and all that. So I'm just going to pose this question. What I'm saying is, when you've gone through all this Nikkata, I'm not talking of literary writing as such. I'm not talking any personality, female or gender-wise. When you go through literary Nikkata and all that through school, what it happens is the judgment of what you're reading looks just as I've studied in Air Force School. It looks on the working basis. As you're moving on, everything is going to be crossed and you have to cross on to achieve your goal. That's one part of the question. But when we watched Grease 2 and all in Bangalore, I'm talking Grease 2. So gender-based questions, I think we can't shift on to any particular left or right. I think it looks on the phase of your perceptionally due. Like you're looking at a painting, or I'm not talking about an author in general. I'm just looking perceptions to a writing or a portrayal or anything. I'm just talking in general. I mean, it's not based on, because we can't talk about anybody in particular.
Actually, you asked me a question which miraculously actually ties up for me with, Niti's question as well.
Yeah.
The question is this: who decides? And I am, I wear saris and I'm very docile, and apart from shouting here, other places I'm very docile and stuff like that. But I'm a firm advocate of saying nobody, no myth, no public opinion should help you determine what you want. Never bow down to pressure from anybody. If you want to read Nick Carter, sir, please go ahead and read Nick Carter and say, I find it literary. If you don't want to read Nick Carter, you're free to do so. So, and again, in sense of the relationships also, there is no one size fits all that, extramarital affairs are horrible, extramarital affairs are fantastic. If it suits you, if that's what you want more than any other thing, and you're willing to pay for the consequences, please go ahead, be my guest.
And if I may add one more thing, three of us here are fiction writers. So when you're writing fiction, you're not, yes, you have a responsibility and so on, and you also want people to take away, a life message and so on, perhaps. But when you're writing for that character. I'm not here only to sit there and pass messages and morals on. I have certain things that I make sure. For instance, if I have characters who are having sex, I may want to make sure that they use protection, unless there is a reason where they haven't used protection and it leads to consequences, which is also which has got to be built into the storyline, but it wouldn't be a careless thing that I have overlooked. But otherwise, you're not there to pass morals on through your writing. You're there to tell a story, and you will tell it to the best you can. So, anything that we talk about here could be our own personal views in personal life, but not necessarily in what is depicted in characters that you're writing about.
And if you do turn pregnant, don't let any right to life loony or anybody tell you it's wrong to abort. Abort if you want to, So only you, master your life, and that's the only way you can be happy. All the weird things that you try to kind of, live up to will ultimately cause you to crack up.
And if indeed you follow Nandita's advice and have an affair, please read Three's a Crowd.
Can I go ahead?
Yes,
Hi,
please.
I'm Satya Saran, and I have read 2 of you. I will now go and start reading the other 2. I'm not going to name which 2. I just wanted to share something that, you know, just like when you watch uh, film stars in movies smoking and it glamorizes smoking. As we are growing up, we read books which talk of passionate love affairs, Wuthering Heights. I mean, I read Wuthering Heights and I wanted to fall in love immediately. I was all of 14. You know, so it glamorizes love, it glamorizes romance. And then I got married at 19. And by 22, you know, the romance was kind of fading. My husband was chasing his career. I was chasing being a housewife, which I hated doing. And somewhere I said, now I want romance. So I fell in love. Luckily, I fell in love with John Keats. So, so you know, what I'm trying to say is that now I have been married and to the same man for 40 years. And the journey from, yeah, it does deserve applause. And more to him than to me because he's the more tolerant partner. I'm the Mercury. You know, but what I'm saying is that from 19 to whatever age I am, which is close to 100, one goes through every aspect of life. At 30, you are a different person. Then at 40, you are completely a different person. At 50, you're seeing life going past and saying, hell, what have I done? I want to do something exciting. And romance is one possibility. So at that point, to hang on and to understand each other and to say, no, but this is the man I've chosen and this is whom I want to live with. The unknown, the grass is not necessarily greener on the other side, is very important to remember.
Great things happen at the Bangalore Lit Fest. Huh? We are actually in the presence of the Satya Sharan. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here and listening to our session. Anybody wants to respond to Satya's question?
I've read your book. I've read your columns. You write beautifully. I'm a great fan of your writing. I will. So, yeah. So I wanted to say that, no matter what you do, no matter what you talk about romance and anything else, there will always be the one you cannot have. That was the title of my last book. So there is going to be the one you cannot have. Accept that. No matter what stage of marriage you are in, and that's one of the messages of my book. So that's what I wanted to say.
Look at money. How much money is enough money? How much love is enough love? At some point you mature and you understand that, look, I might be hankering for a lot more, but in that hankering, I'm going to lose what I have as well. So, it's the same. Somewhere take that analogy and push it forward.
No, I just think that the important thing, I just say that, it's not about putting limits on what you can't have or can have, because everyone wants to be happy. And I think to me, the only thing that should be applied perhaps is not to have double standards, to not be going out there and hurting somebody. So if there is something, if there is the one you can't have and but somebody else that you can have and you're not happy with the one you have, then yeah, by all means do resolve it and give yourself a chance at hope. And which is why we started off by saying that this whole thing about love is about hope and not necessarily saying I'm going to be self-suffering and sacrificing, and a little bit of selfishness or shooting for your own happiness is also pretty important, as long as, let's not have double standards and saying, okay, I can go out there and have that little extramarital affair, but I'd be really burnt up if the other, my spouse does it and so on. So,
at the risk of, actually shooting down my budding romantic novelist career, I would say if out of two people who are going to get hurt, and it's guaranteed one of them is going to get hurt, ensure that you are not the one. One last question, please. Mike, please.
And I am sharing my two thoughts, and I would like doctor to comment on it. One is that love is spiritual because it is created by God. Marriage is a human-made thing. And because it's a human-made thing, there are errors. And to bypass those errors, human has created exceptions, which is called nothing but in Hindi we call it talaq. Yep. No, it's not in Hindi, it's in Urdu. So that's the big difference between these two setups, because human wanted the community to live, to survive and to move ahead. They created these setup, which is nothing but one of the thing is marriage. And when your love is spiritual, how do you recognize the spiritual love is the love between mother and the child? Yeah. So this is my first thing which I would like to hear your comments on, sir.
I'll just talk here.
Uh, it's very rare that I learn something new. I'm full of knowledge. I'm from Bihar. I'm a native speaker of Hindi, though I have a surname that's Bengali. My Bengali is worse than my Hindi. And with your question, I realized there isn't even a word in Hindi for divorce. We borrow from Urdu. Wow. Your question.
He's got something else to ask.
Yes. But I will ask first.
Only 2 questions and the lady's waiting. So you finish your question.
Okay. Okay, the second thought which I had is what is this love all about when it comes to the real human being? So love, from my understanding, is growing together. So you are helping each other to grow together. How, not yourself, but to the other person, and that is where the love arises, and it becomes spiritual. And at this moment, I understand marriage is a human-made thing, so I have 2 suggestions for the audience as well as for sir to comment, that if you are going for a marriage, do a background check done, and look at the upbringing of an individual. It applies to both gender.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me respond to those then. First off, the whole business about, love being spiritual because it was created by God. I'm not getting into the God dilemma. Personally, I'm an atheist, so I don't know that it was created. It just exists. However, the key issue in marriage, and I do agree with you, marriage is a man-made institution. It came together largely because people wanted, the patency of the family. It started really because the children needed a secure environment, which is why, marriages started taking place. However, the peculiarity of marriage is, it is perhaps the closest relationship that 2 human beings can have together, the closest intimate relationship that 2 people can have together, but it's not a blood relationship, which is why we have to work so hard at it. You can't divorce your family. You can't divorce your parents, although you might want to. You can't divorce anybody else except your partner. And therefore, this is the relationship which has the potential for you, as you rightly said, to grow together. The most potential to grow together, yet the relationship which is the least bonded, in terms of a blood bond. We tend to think that blood bonds are for life, but a bond in which we actively engage in or participate in is something we need to work harder at. So that, I think, is why marriage is a little more difficult than any other relationship. But if we are shooting for what you mentioned, that is the capacity to grow together. And I do believe that probably the most important fundamental of a marriage should be companionship and joy. I think that we really need to work at it to make that happen. I don't know about background checks. You can check backgrounds till you're blue in the face, and suddenly you're going to find something that you missed.
I just want to add to that, since you mentioned spirituality. The first lesson I learned when I embarked on my path of spirituality is, if you know yourself, like you said, you have to think of the other person. If you know yourself properly, your compassion grows. If your compassion grows, it will encompass people closer to you. So know yourself first. Don't try to work for somebody else first. Work for yourself, and the growth will happen. Okay, one last question. Vasanti, sorry, one last question. Keep it brief, huh?
I think it would highly depend on it will highly depend on how each one defines respect for themselves, If it's for the woman in the marriage, what is respect to her? Suppose a woman's identity comes from waking up at 5 in the morning, making breakfast for her husband, children, and that's where she feels needed, that's where she feels wanted. And then that's what she's thinking about, So in which, if she feels respected, she is. You know, somebody else looking at it from outside may say, oh, she's just the maid in the family. She's just doing it of her, this thing. So I think it's for each person, do you feel good doing it? If you feel good doing it, then you're respected. It's as simple as that. According to me, that is what it is, you know. And what is it that you expect from your partner? If you feel respected, you are respected. It's no one can tell you that this is respect. If you do this, if he's doing this for you, if he's getting you roses for you on your birthday, if he's buying diamonds for you, then you're respected. No, because then you're going by somebody else's value. What is it that you want and what makes you feel valued? I feel that's how I would define it.
Yeah, I'll repeat what I said earlier, which is, to me, I think not having a double standard works, you know, which is that the same criteria that you apply for the other person or for yourself. I mean, there can't be a disconnect between that.
Since you very kindly let me off the hook and I don't have to define respect, and I'm only confined to answering how important it is in a relationship, I'd say it is one of the cornerstones, you know. If we can't respect each other, it's going to be very hard for us to function as, as a cogent unit.
I will just sign off on one small footnote. And in India, actually, respect always flows upward. You respect somebody who has power over you. The fact is, if you can't respect your servant maid, you cannot respect your driver, you cannot respect your sweeper, you cannot respect anybody. So once you have respect in you, then you can follow it up with respect for your husband, for your children, for your parents, for everybody. But respect should not be, oh, he's my husband and therefore I will respect him. And I will just want to take one small political, I'll make a political statement. And this is because I am and will be a lifelong student. And I want to just say, Hok Kolrob. I'll tell you later. This is, in solidarity with the students of Jadavpur University.
Thank you so much for that brilliant session. I would now like to request our speakers to please sign the BLF board. Thank you, Vasanti ma'am and Nilesh sir, for waiting so patiently. We're really sorry about the delay. I would like to request the audience to please come forward, those sitting at the back. Those who wish to get their books signed may please proceed to the signing area, which is right behind the help desk. We will be starting the next session now. The Gaon Connection, the Village Voice. We have Nilesh Mishra and Vasanti Hariprakash in conversation. Nilesh Mishra has written Once Upon a Time Zone, The Absent State, End of the Line, the story of the killing of the royals in Nepal, and 173 Hours in Captivity. Known for his radio show, Yadon Ka Idiot Box with Nilesh Mishra on Big FM 92.7, he is also co-founder, editor of Gaon Connection, India's rural newspaper. He has founded the content creation company, Content Project. Vasanti Hariprakash is an independent journalist, television and radio personality, besides being a documentary filmmaker and media trainer. Earlier, a special correspondent with NDTV reporting on socio-political, environmental issues of Karnataka from the Bangalore Bureau, she has also anchored a documentary series on BBC called 1 Square Mile. Starting off at the news desk at Indian Express, she .commed at an editorial of a news desk at an editorial of a business portal, then switched to radio as RJ. She bagged the India Radio Excellence Award in 2007 for Best English RJ. We'll be starting the session now. Over to the speakers.
Okay, this is sound check time. Okay, I guess this is sound check time. For those who are here in the audience, I actually want to do an audience poll, thinking how many of you have walked in thinking that this is a Goan connection? You do? All right. Well, you can't be blamed because I think it's such a close thing. That I think actually my special guest here, Nilesh, and I should have been in Goan colors, at least out of solidarity for that perceived topic. But here we are talking about something very, very exciting, and especially for anybody who has anything to do with newspapers. Because that's something which is all pervading, it's something that all of us begin our day with. But just to think that there is, among all the large circulating newspapers, among all the newspapers that think of themselves as, you know, major enterprise and even franchise sometimes, there is what is called the country's first rural newspaper. And I just want to flag this off right at the beginning. It's called the Gaon Connection. It is something which really cheers the spirit, and I'm going to lose no further time in talking to someone who came up with this idea. So Nilesh, after having done all that was mentioned in the introduction, and in a mainstream media, also after having written songs, for those of you who do not know, if you have heard a song called Jadoo